Hi, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, Bookalicious, where we talk all things books. I'm so excited to be filming part 2 of my yearly reading recap, where I'm basically just going to discuss all of the books that I've read. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, then totally check that out. I can talk for pretty much ever. Like, I will probably never shut up until the world combusts, but I promise that this part will be a lot shorter than the other video, because the other video I was talking about books that I've never discussed or gone into detail before on this channel. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about books that I've already covered in my monthly reading wrap-ups. But I still want to do this video. I still think it's going to be so much fun to just reflect and go over all of the books that I've read so far this year. So let's get right into the video. In the last video, I talked about all of the books that I read in February, so we're moving on to March now. And the first book I read in March was The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. It was my very first Sarah Adams book, and her writing style is so cozy and quirky, and it's just a fun time. I know a lot of people say that her books feel too childish for adult rom-coms, but I personally just love how easy and breezy the writing style is. She's also known for doing a lot of closed door, zero spice books, and you can still feel the chemistry and the physical attraction between her couples without needing explicit detail of what they're doing to each other in the bedroom. And I really enjoyed The Cheat Sheet. I'm not typically a friends to lovers girly. I'm an enemies to lovers fan all the way, but this is just so wholesome and impossible to not be rooting for these characters, Bree and Nathan. It's got fake dating as well, and I gave it 4.75, so close to being 5 stars, but overall it was just so cute, and I totally recommend it. The next book I read was Addicted to You by Krista and Becca Ritchie, the first book in a very long series. I know I might upset some people because I know that this book and this series means so much to so many romance book lovers, and I'm definitely going to continue with this series. 3.5 is not a bad rating. I mean, sometimes it is, but it definitely isn't a bad rating for this book. It's just that the romance was a bit lackluster for me. I didn't obsess over the characters. I mean, I did obsess over the side characters. I loved Rosie and what was his name? Reich. I loved Reich so much. Totally forgot his name for a second, but I loved him so much. And, you know, the main characters were not my favorites, and the story felt very lusty, but that's kind of the point because one of the characters has an addiction to sex, and the guy is an alcoholic, and they're faking a relationship so that their families think that they are stable, but they're not, and you're just kind of following their lives, and they're very famous as well. And it was a good book, but it just wasn't extraordinary. Like, the way people talk about this book, I was expecting so much more, and so I definitely went in with super high expectations and got let down a little bit. But I totally have plans to continue with this series because I need to know what happens next, and there are some other side characters that I definitely want to read about in the future, so we'll definitely continue with this series, I promise. The next book I read was Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. Lynn Painter is one of my favorite authors of all time. Better Than the Movies is like gold tier for me in terms of romance books. Better Than the Movies is everything to me. I love Betting on You and The Do-Over, and this is her first adult romance book that I read, and it definitely let me down so much. Without going into too much detail, because I went into a lot of detail in my March reading wrap up about this book, it was just way too physical. And I think the reason why it was so physical is because obviously in Lynn's YA books, she can't put explicit detail into those. So I think that she added it so much into this book that she forgot to do the emotional connection between the two characters, and that really upset me because it was like a total switch where they just disliked each other and then it went super physical. And I can't even pinpoint a moment where I was like, okay, I see them connecting, I see them falling in love. Like, no, they didn't fall in love, they fell in lust. They did. And the main character was so infuriating. I could literally fill up this entire video with how much I disliked her. She was very quirky, but not in a lovable way. It was just in a really annoying, brash, loud, irritating way, and I just really didn't like her. She was just so annoying. I hated being in her POV. The guy didn't irritate me, but he was just very basic, and it just wasn't a great book. I gave it 2 stars instead of 1 star because at least Lynn Painter's writing style is just really quick and easy to get through. There were some funny moments, but otherwise this was definitely one of my least favorite books of the year. Next up is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This is another 3.5 book for me, and this book was not bad. It was just extremely out of my comfort zone. I'm pretty sure you know what it's about. 2 serial killers fall in love. There's a lot of spice, there's a lot of murder, there's a lot of craziness going on in this book, and it was just so out of my comfort zone. It made me super squeamish. There was definitely a little too much spice, in my opinion, and too much detail of what was going on as well. It was very explicit, but it was still a really fun, wild ride. I really enjoyed the 2 main characters. They had some really sweet moments, and I actually did feel an emotional connection between them, maybe because they're both serial killers killing other serial killers, but it was a crazy book, but it was fun. And if you love dark romance books and spicy books, then I would totally recommend this to you because I think you would absolutely love it. I don't currently have any plans to continue on with this series, the Ruinous Love trilogy. I know that the 2nd book is out right now, and I've seen a lot of mixed reviews on that, so I don't think I'm going to continue with this series, but the 1st book was really, really fun. The next book I read was City of Glass by Miss Cassandra Clare, and this is the 3rd book in the Mortal Instruments series. I'm trying to make my way through this series so I can get to the Infernal Devices, which is the entire reason why I even started Cassandra Clare's books, because everyone's been hyping up the Infernal Devices, and so I really just want to get through this series. And I know that you can read the Infernal Devices without reading Mortal Instruments, but I need to read all the books in order of publication so that I understand the world building and the magic system and past characters and just understand what's going on. But this 3rd book, I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't as fast-paced and fun as book 2, but we got a lot of answers in this book to a lot of the questions that I had about certain characters and certain relationships, which I was very thankful for. And I really enjoy the side characters. Simon, Alec, and Isabel are the MVPs. I love them so much. Jason and Clary are okay. They're okay. They're nothing special. They're okay. But yeah, I really am having a good time with this series. It is a little bit dragged out for me. Like, the books need shorter chapters. They do. Chapters do not need to be 30 to 40 pages long. They don't. But it's a fun, wacky series, and I'm slowly but surely making my way through it. The next book I read was You Wouldn't Catch Me Dead by Tess James Mackey, and she is becoming one of my favorite YA mystery authors. I read Someone Is Watching You back in 2023, and that book just was amazing. 5 stars, got me out of a really bad reading slump at the time. And this book was a 4.5. It was really good, not as good as Someone Is Watching You, but I still really loved this book. And it had one of the most wholesome, most beautiful friendships developed that I've ever read about. Maybe not ever, but definitely one of my favorite friendships in a book. And the mystery was really creepy and interesting, and I didn't know what was going on at all. So I highly recommend this book, especially if you love YA teen mysteries and books with camping settings as well. Then you'll definitely love this, and you should totally check out Someone Is Watching You as well. Moving on to the other books I read in March, I read A Seven Letter Word by Kim Slater. This is a super adorable, wholesome middle grade book. I still have so many middle grade books from when I was 12 and I've just never gotten around to reading them. And I want to still read all of them because you never know. You never know. Sometimes middle grade books are so good, and this one was really wholesome. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I definitely recommend it if you just want a cute little book to read. Moving on to Geek Girl by Holly Small. The show for this just came out. I haven't seen it yet, and I gave this one 4 stars. It was very good. It was kind of like a middle grade, but kind of like a really young YA book about this girl who's a geek, and she becomes a model and goes into that industry. And so that was really fun to read about. It started off really good, and then it kind of lost me a little bit in the end, and some of the side characters were really annoying as well, and I didn't love the main character, but it was still a really cute book, and I would recommend it if you just want something really easy to get through. The next book I picked up was Matched, and this had a really fun, unique dystopian setting where basically every single thing is controlled for you, the work that you do, who you end up marrying, when you die, like so many interesting dystopian rules. And I really loved the setup, and the first 100 pages of the book really gripped me, and I was certain that the romance in this book was going to be so, so good. And then when it got to the romance, it just felt a little bit lackluster to me, and the book got a little bit boring near the end. So I don't have any plans to continue on with this trilogy at the moment, but I really did think that the book had a lot of potential, and the plot and the world building was really unique, but it lost me a little bit. But it still wasn't a horrible book or anything, so if you love dystopian books, then I would recommend this to you. The next book that I read was 13 by Tom Hoyle, and this is a fun YA thriller book. I almost thought it was dystopian before I read it, and it definitely had some dystopian vibes, but it wasn't set in like a futuristic world or anything like that. It was just a dark mystery thriller. It has a cult, and it was just very creepy and exciting, and I gave it 5 stars. Looking back on it now, I could probably lower the rating to a 4.75, not because the book wasn't amazing. It was amazing, but I just haven't been thinking about it a bunch since I stopped reading it. But I will still keep it at 5 stars because I had a really fun reading experience with this book, and the plot was really unique and exciting, and I loved the characters. There's a second book in this series that I definitely want to get to. It's not a top priority for me right now, but I definitely want to read it, and I totally recommend this book. I had such a good time with it. The next book that I read was Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver, one of my favorite books of the year so far. 5 stars, absolutely adored this book so much, and I actually watched the movie before I read the book. I watched the movie a few years ago, and the movie's literally like my favorite thing ever. The movie is like infinity out of 10. I love the film so much, and I love the book so much as well, and I love how similar both the book and the movie are, but then they kind of have a lot of differences as well. The movie definitely takes some artistic liberties, which I love in the movie, but then I loved getting more background and detail about the characters in the book. It's just a super emotional, heartbreaking Groundhog Day book where the girl has to keep reliving the same Valentine's Day over and over and over again. And she's very unlikable at the beginning. She's very unlikable, but you grow to love her so much as a character when the book is about to end, and it made me cry. Not a bunch of books make me cry, but this one totally did, and I'm just obsessed with the book and the movie, and I totally need to rewatch the movie again soon, very soon. Next up, we are moving on to all the books I read in April. The first book that I read was The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black, one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time. The Cruel Prince series means everything to me. That's the series that got me back into loving reading and loving fantasy. So that series holds such a special place in my heart. And this series is a fun little duology spin-off where we're following Oak Greenbrier and his adventure, his love story, and I really enjoyed this book. I think it was such a good conclusion to such a strong duology. I will say that even though it was so close to being a 5-star read, the reason that it wasn't 5 stars is because the romance, while the romance was good, it just wasn't on the same level of Jude and Carden. And I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be on that same level because Jude and Carden are just like iconic. We love Jude and Carden so much. But the romance just never felt close to that level, but it was still amazing. The writing style that Holly Black does is just so whimsical and beautiful, and it's just amazing to read. I also had such a good time seeing a lot of cameos of a lot of the characters that we've grown to love from the Cruel Prince series. That was super amazing, and it was just a really good book. 4.75, really, really loved it. The next book that I read was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I'm a little bit nervous to talk about this book because I could never seem to quite talk about it the way that it needs to be talked about, because this book is amazing. Like, the writing style is so eloquent. On paper, this book is perfect. Very, very amazing, eloquent, poised, elegant writing style. But I did get a little bit bored with this book, and I don't think that's the book's fault. I just personally, I don't think literary fiction is for me. I wanted to step out of my comfort zone when I decided to read this book, but I don't think lit fics are my cup of tea. If they were, then this book would probably be 5 stars for me because, like I said, it's perfect on paper. And the book, really quickly, is about this woman named Esther, and she's basically just telling you about all of her life experiences with jobs, relationships, friendships, and she is struggling with mental health as well. And I did appreciate seeing mental health representation in this book, which I think was handled really well. And there were some parts of this book that I did highlight a lot of on my Kindle app where I was just really loving the writing style. And then there were just some parts that bored me a lot. So 3 stars, not a bad rating. And if I was a lit fic girly, this book would definitely be a 5-star read. So if you love lit fics and classic books, then I totally recommend this to you. I think you would absolutely love it if you're a lit fic fan. The next book I read was Time Riders by Alex Scarrow, and this book was a 3.25 for me. It wasn't a bad book, it just wasn't amazing. And sci-fi time travel books are not usually my favorite books to read about, but I do think that if you are a big sci-fi time travel lover, then you will really appreciate this book. It's YA, it's super easy to get through. I was absolutely in love with the short chapters. This book is about 400 pages long, and this book has about 97 chapters. So I loved that. I'm a short chapter lover, and I was very pleased about that, and it really helped the fast-paced plot of the book. And again, if you love sci-fi and time travel, then I totally recommend this to you. The next book I read was another Sarah Adams book, When in Rome, and I really loved this one. I gave it 4.5 stars, which I was super surprised to give it this high of a rating, just because it didn't initially seem like the type of romance book that I would love, but I really did love this book. I loved the characters. The grumpy sunshine dynamic was done so well, and I loved the small town elements and how nosy everybody was about their relationship, and the fact that she was a pop singer and he was a baker in this small town was just so cute, and I loved their whole dynamic. I loved his sisters as well as side characters, and this book was just a feel-good book. It was just so adorable. The next book I read was Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas, and I gave this 4 stars. And I did not go into this with high expectations whatsoever, because everybody always says that this is their least favorite book in the Throne of Glass series, because a lot of people do not like the character that this book follows. And I understand, but I personally love him very much. I do not agree with everything that he's done, but I do love him a lot as a character, and so it was very interesting to see his perspective and to just be able to learn more about him and see his journey and his love story. And this book wasn't as action-packed as a lot of the other books in the series. It was more so a story of healing, emotional and physical healing, and I really did enjoy it. It definitely wasn't the best book in this series, but it wasn't bad at all by any means. It was a little bit long. It could have been shorter for sure, but I really enjoyed this book. Moving on to the last free books I read in April, I read Addison Cook and the Treasure of the Incas. This is just a cute little middle grade book that I gave 3 stars. And if I was like 10 years old when I read this book, then I would have absolutely loved it. But it was really cute, 3 stars. Moving on to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This book was so cute. It's a really whimsical, cozy fantasy, and it has the grumpy sunshine dynamic, but it's reversed. So the FMC is grumpy, and then her love interest is the sunshine. He's very, very bubbly and happy all the time and has such golden retriever energy, and I really enjoyed this book. I will say that I do not recommend it if you are not in a cozy fantasy mood. If you want a high stakes, action packed fantasy book and a super duper romantic fantasy book, then I probably wouldn't recommend this to you. But if you're in a cozy fantasy mood, then I think you would absolutely adore this book. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really, really good, and I'm excited to see what happens in the sequel. The last book that I read in April was The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson, who is one of my favorite authors of all time. The A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series means everything to me. I love that series. I still need to watch the show that came out, but that book series is everything to me. I love Five Survive as well, and this book was also just absolutely incredible. I love her writing style so much. And even though the main character, Belle, is a total brat and so unlikable, she still didn't spoil the book. The book was so fast-paced and interesting and just so almost eerie in a way, because you have no idea what happened to Rachel. You're trying to solve the mystery and figure it out, and there's so many suspects and so many possible reasons as to why Rachel disappeared in the first place. And the plot twist had me so shocked. I did not see it coming at all, and I just loved the way that it ended, and I just loved the romantic subplot in this book as well, which was very, very adorable, and it made Belle much more likable whenever she was with her love interest. He brought out the best in her for sure, and this book was just so, so good, and I totally recommend it. Holly Jackson books never miss. I love you guys with all my heart so much, and I told you that this video was going to be shorter than the other one. I can keep it short sometimes, and I'm just so happy that I still have this platform to be able to discuss books with all of you. And please let me know some of your favorite books that you've read so far this year, or some of your least favorite books as well. And part 3 of my reading recap of the year will be up very soon, and I just love you all. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I will see you all in a new video very soon, and happy reading to you.